Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga, and today we are here to talk about the guy. This guy. The one with the hair that looks amazing regardless of whether it's up or it's down. His name is Gojo, and he is more or less the crowning feature of Jujutsu Kaisen. However, Gojo is a problem. In fact, the mere idea that he even exists at all is a problem. One that is not at all easy to solve, and that has gone on to damage many lesser written series, not just anime or manga, but media in general. And that would be the concept of an overpowered protagonist, which I want to immediately distinguish as a concept from the idea of an overpowered antagonist, which is much more commonly seen, particularly in the realm of the shonen series. They tend to emerge from necessity more than anything else. You know, the whole idea that, we need a new villain, someone who is more powerful than the previous villain, as well as all of our protagonists combined, and that sort of thing. It happens a lot. But the much rarer flip side of this is the overpowered protagonist, someone who no antagonist could ever hope to stand up to, and who completely dwarfs our other allied characters. You don't see this sort of thing too often because, quite frankly, they are narrative poison to almost any series that is looking to tell some sort of engaging story with any form of tension. But one of the quotes I remember most fondly from Jujutsu Kaisen is the idea of using poison to fend off other poison. And that is what Satoru Gojo is. He is narrative poison that Gege Akutami has deliberately injected into the world of Jujutsu Kaisen in order to combat other narrative poisons. So how did Akutami achieve what so many have tried and failed? Well, let's go ahead and solve the Gojo problem. A solution that begins with a quick round of Satoru Gojo or Katoru Gojo. A very simple minigame, the rules of which are as follows. There is a knock at your door, knock knock, and you are going to answer it. However, before doing so, you must guess whether your surprise visitor is Satoru Gojo or Katoru Gojo. Should you guess incorrectly, then your punishment will be to subscribe to the New World Review, resulting in consistent injections of Jujutsu Kaisen content administered straight into your YouTube feed. Meanwhile, if you do guess correctly, then you will get to pat your visitor. So what will it be, Satoru or Katoru Gojo? Make your choice now and we shall reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1, and bam, it's Satoru Gojo, unfortunately, because I really did like the cat. But if you chose Katoru, then you know the thing to do, and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a newly cursed denizen of the New World Review. Welcome. But to get back to the thing that is the actual topic of the video, an overpowered protagonist presents a lot of hurdles to any author. Firstly, via the whole idea that tension, particularly in an action-based series, is almost entirely dependent on facing off against adversity, which, means encountering antagonists who are superior in some sense, be it power, intelligence, or maybe even both of those things. But having an overpowered protagonist immediately renders that potential null and void. Because what's the big deal after all? I mean, sure, this villainous prick dude has just shown up, but well, we have Gojo, So why should we even bother worrying? He'll take care of it easy. Nor is there any tension to do with that character themselves because you know that they're going to be okay in the end. And before I continue, just a semantic point of order. I know that some people out there in the comments section, you know who you are, will probably take issue with calling Gojo a protagonist because Yuji is our primary protagonist, but I am here to say that that P word extends to most major characters as well, so don't go all internet on me in the comments and begin a sentence with actually. And seriously, Gojo is the legit center of this world. Every action taken in Jujutsu Kaisen seems to revolve around him in some way, so he is a protagonist faux show. In any case, moving on. Because the overpowered protagonist also tends to have a bit of a negative effect on their fellow protagonists, very much minimizing them, sometimes to the point where you even have to question why they're still in the series at all. A classic example of this would of course be Dragon Ball, where protagonistic power got so out of control that there was just really nothing for the extended cast to do because they became more or less pointless with a few key exceptions. And the basic solution to the first two problems goes as follows. You need to remove the overpowered protagonist from the story temporarily, because that's the only way that other characters are going to have a reason to kick into gear, as well as the only way to create any sort of drama and tension through conflicts with villains, and villains that would be absolutely nothing if faced against our overpowered dudebra. But this solution actually leads to another problem, because sure, it's okay to do this a couple of times, but the longer the story goes on, the reasons for keeping the overpowered protagonist out of the action become more and more desperate and contrived. There's only so many excuses an author can find, and one of my favorite things to note in shonen manga are all of the creative excuses that mangaka dig and dig and dig to find and implement. But if an author fails to deal with all of these problems satisfactorily, then the worst consequence pops up, which is that their overpowered character is boring. And that goes on to undermine the entire series because they've taken a big risk implementing such a character in the first place, and now not only are they a narrative detriment, but their presence also isn't anything special, and so the series enters a death spiral. And this sense of boringosity is particularly present if the character is, say, perfect in every aspect. Like, not only are they overpowered, they're also the smartest and most likable in the series. If your character contains all three of those features, then congratulations, because you've just crafted the most boring existence in all of character history. In fact, I'd honestly say that if your character has even 2 out of 3 of those features, then your story is probably going to struggle to deal with them. Which brings us to Gojo, because the first big tick of approval he gets is by only possessing 1 out of those 3 features. He is overpowered, and that is all. He is certainly not the smartest character in Jujutsu Kaisen, nor is he the most likable. And just quickly, actually, I should point this out. What I mean by most likable is in world. I don't mean the impression that we have of Gojo as fans, because he's obviously wildly popular. But within the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, feelings regarding Gojo can range from mild discomfort to full-on hatred. A range that comes from people who are supposedly on our side as well, fighting the curses and everything. For example, Gojo's students, they deeply respect him, but they also quite blatantly disrespect him at the same time, due to finding his nature quite off-putting. Utahime takes this a step further by often wanting to get legitimately mad at Gojo, even if it is generally played for comedy. And if we want something more serious, then well, we would look at Gakuganji, who should theoretically be our ally, but clearly wants to rid this world of Gojo, as did the higher-ups of the entire Jujutsu society. Even if he is feared and respected for his power, Gojo is not what I would call a well-liked character in the series. In fact, the only one who really represents how the fanbase feels about him would be Miwa, but she is the outlier. And this is such an essential element to Gojo's success, because if everyone in the series did like him, then Jujutsu Kaisen would just turn into a competition to see who could jerk Gojo off the hardest. Metaphorically, of course, but I don't know, actually, maybe literally, because that does happen with these types of characters in other media. You know those stories that are clearly just the fantasies of the author writing themselves as the overpowered protagonist, where all the guys are like, oh, damn, he's cool, and all the girls fall in love at first sight, like, I mean, I don't want to name names, so I'm just gonna pick 3 words from the dictionary at random, and it looks like those words are art, online, and sword. But conflict at any level is always much more interesting, and Gojo has a ton of that from almost every character within his grand radius. And as for being the smartest, look, I should have given Gojo more credit here because he is wildly intelligent. However, a lot of that gets washed away through his other personality traits, a primary one being arrogance. Gojo is a person who has well and truly gotten carried away with his insane power, so he doesn't necessarily handle himself or situations in the most efficiently possible ways, which opens up rare moments of vulnerability. And this is very important because if Gojo was the greatest genius to have ever existed, in addition to being the most powerful, then there would never be a satisfying reason to get the better of him. So Gojo's arrogance and his aloofness is a detracting factor for him in-world, but a huge narrative advantage for Akutami to wield. In addition to this, his goofball nature is also a great benefit because that endears him all the more to readers and watchers. I really cannot imagine a world where Gojo is stripped of his comic aspects, and the closest we can really come to that is the original Jujutsu Kaisen series, where Gojo had not yet fully been realized. He was a much more serious, stoic presence, and yeah, he still had some gags, but the overall product was significantly less captivating than the character he went on to become. And another example of how beneficial goofiness can be would be Saitama, because One Punch Man handles him very, very well, because like Gojo, Saitama is not well loved by society, although I guess he's more ignored than anything, and also he's a bit of a moron, which is very endearing, and even though he is this completely overpowered protagonist, that sheer idiocy often gives him the sort of illusion of maybe being the underdog regardless. Like, there is still that bizarre moment of tension where before every fight you're wondering, is this gonna be the one? Although I wouldn't say Gojo is quite the same in that respect, with a few key manga-related exceptions, he is quite clearly in command of his situations. But one feature that Akutami really cannot get around is the idea that for anything dramatic in Jujutsu Kaisen to take place, Gojo needs to be out of of the picture. And there's only so many times you can get away with the excuse of, oh, Gojo is out of town on another mission, or oh, Gojo, he's off buying souvenirs because he's crazy. What poor timing. I guess it's up to our first years to take on this special grade curse. But thus far, Akutami has made this work quite well. Never has there been a situation where I've sighed and gone, oh, look, this is clearly just an excuse to keep Gojo out. And probably my favorite Gojo roadblock was during the Kyoto Goodwill event, where a curtain was constructed specifically to keep Gojo out and nobody else. You don't see that sort of thing too often in other series, and a lot of credit here also goes to the power system of Jujutsu Kaisen, which allows for these strange conditions to be set in exchange for compromises elsewhere. Like, to bring up Dragon Ball again, you are never going to see a power-based technique that is designed to just stop Goku going for a war. And admittedly, a great advantage that Jujutsu Kaisen has is that it is a relatively young series. So the problem I pointed out earlier regarding needing to find crazier and crazier reasons to remove Gojo hasn't really had a chance to become apparent yet, if it will at all. Now I'm going to throw up a quick spoiler warning for anime-only watchers. You probably really don't want to listen to what I'm about to say, so please do skip to this here time thing to avoid spoilers. But if you're a manga reader, or if you just don't care, then shall we all continue? I think the greatest praise I have for how Akutami has handled Gojo to this point is having removed him from the story seemingly completely. Keeping him within the prison realm is so important because for the first time in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, it truly feels like we have a desperate situation on our hands. Even during Shibuya, I had the thought in the back of my mind that Gojo would probably be released by the end, so I could not have been more pleasantly surprised. Primarily because if he did get released, then we just have to face the same problem of removing him from the action for the next arc. And in retrospect, this entire first saga of Jujutsu Kaisen was pretty much one gigantic endeavor just to get rid of Gojo. Everything came back to assist in sealing him, be it Jogo's combat experience, the test curtain that was thrown up during the Goodwill event, and everything to do with Geto, not Geto, and Gojo's past. It was all just one big 136 chapter endeavor to get rid of Gojo, so with that in mind, we really should keep him sealed as long as possible to allow everyone else to really stand on their own feet and take command of this series. Now, speaking of everyone else, a very important aspect as to why Gojo works is that almost every other character of Jujutsu Kaisen is crafted to be compelling in their own ways, meaning that we do not have to rely on Gojo to carry the story because we're also quite deeply invested in them as well, which is important because it means you don't always have the time or inclination to ask awkward questions like, where's Gojo? Because you're just completely in that moment with everyone else. Also, here's the thing, even when it comes down to a very standard scenario of overpowered Gojo coming into conflict with an antagonist whose defeat was guaranteed, it is still so enjoyable to watch. Mostly because Gojo is a natural performer. Even in a scenario where he's in the most one-sided conflict imaginable, he makes that experience enjoyable, and in the end, that's all that really matters. Because the biggest problem with overpowered characters isn't necessarily the narrative headaches they can cause, but rather that they risk making the series very flat and unenjoyable after a certain point. But Gojo is a masterclass of how to avoid such stagnation. Firstly, having an overpowered protagonist is fine so long as they aren't perfect. Make them arrogant, make them foolish, make them whatever. Just don't hand them the keys to instantly becoming a god. Secondly, don't make them default likable by the other characters. Insert those little character personality conflicts, because if this overpowered character lacks excitement in battle, then give them back some of that excitement with how they relate to others. And of course, there's no getting around this, do not be lazy with how you choose to implement their roadblocks. You will have to stop these characters from taking action more often than not actually, so definitely get creative with how that needs to happen. And what else can I really say? Gojo definitely ticks all of these boxes. This character is simply a pure masterclass. But now that you've watched this video, go and watch more videos, more of my videos ideally, because look, there are things that you'll like this video. So I look forward to seeing you there.